So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about professional profiles and entering applications in Cayuse 424. Next, I want to talk about what we are going to learn today. Because this class counts as partial credit for that ERA class, you're going to learn a little bit more stuff than just Cayuse. We're going to talk about a few other systems, but not in detail. The first thing that I'm hoping that you're going to get out of this is that you're going to know some of the general ERA guidelines, that you're going to know some of those guidelines in using electronic research administration systems in general. I also want you to understand the purpose of a professional profile. These professional profiles are very important, and I'll go into that in a lot of detail. Also, I hope you're going to know how to create and update a professional profile. I'm thinking by the stars that I see that someone else really hopes that as well. And I love that. Feel free to do that. This is a lot of fun. Then I also hope that you're going to know how to submit a proposal in Cayuse 424, and that you're going to know how to work with us during that review and submission process. This is the outline for today. We're going to have an overview of electronic research administration. We're going to have an overview of Cayuse. Then we're going to talk about professional profiles. We'll go over the applications. And if there's time, I'll go over the resources section with you. If there's not time, I won't go through that, but I will be sending you a PDF of today's presentation after the class. Now let's just get a little bit of an overview of ERA. First, let's talk about the funding process in general at UC Davis. And I'm just talking about the extramural funding process, mostly for research, but we do know that we, get sponsored funding for other things in research. It could be other sponsored activities. It could be instruction. There are many things that it could be. So the first part of the process belongs in that PI and the department. And I've made this a circle because it's a continual process. And so once the end of a sponsored project happens, then usually something else is going to kind of build off of that. And I don't know why I'm using my hands. I hope you're looking at my slides and not, I don't know why I'm using my hands. Okay. So the first part is that principal investigator is going to have an idea and they're going to look for funding. Sometimes they get assistance in finding funding, maybe through our interdisciplinary research support team or someone in their department, but sometimes they may get assistance. The PI is going to write the proposal, again, often with assistance from other people. And the department contract and grant administrator is going to generally help prepare those proposal details, including the budget. We know that you often are integral in completing that budget. And also often that department admin serves as the liaison with sponsored programs. So they actually submit the proposal and work with us during that process. I say often because that's not always the case, right? We understand that there are different levels of support based on where our PIs are located. So sometimes the PI might do all of this, or the PI might do very little of the maybe proposal preparation other than kind of writing the science and pulling people together, right? We know that there's these very, very different levels of support. So I don't want someone to think this is the end all be all. This is a generalization. Then it's going to be submitted to sponsored programs, and we're going to review that proposal for compliance with campus regulations, University of California regulations, the sponsor regulations, terms, their guidelines, right? Their request for proposals, their overarching guidelines if you're submitting to a sponsor that has that, like the NSF, if you submit to them, you also have to follow their PAPPG, their proposal preparation and grants guide, something like that. It's a very long acronym. I have a link to that, and as well as the SF424 guide that the NIH applications must follow, as well as other PHS or public health sciences funding. I will try to define acronyms as I use them, but there's a list of acronyms at the end as well in the resources section. Usually sponsored programs are going to submit that proposal to the sponsor. There are some exceptions to that rule where the PI may be submitting directly. The sponsor is going to review those proposals, determine if they're going to fund them or not, and notify the PI, sometimes the department, and often sponsored programs. Then sponsored programs is going to take in that notice or that notice of award and the award agreement. We're going to review to make sure that the terms and conditions are in compliance with all of those things I said at the proposal stage as well. But at this stage, we're actually looking at the award terms and conditions. Usually there's no terms and conditions to follow. There are no award terms and conditions to follow at the proposal stage. There are exceptions to that rule, so always remember our motto of it depends, and that's why you should read everything. So like our motto is it depends. I follow up with and you should read everything, right? Because it depends so often that I hate saying it depends. And then also we're going to accept that award on behalf of the regents. At that time, after the award is fully executed and the funding is obligated, the process transfers over to contracts and grants accounting, and they do the funding portion. The PI and the department are going to be working with them to get the actual funding allocated. That is not something that Sponsored Programs does. It goes over there. And then after the PI completes the sponsored project, often they use the results of that project or their findings to develop more projects, right? So often it's this like continual basis. And so that's why I like to think of it as a cycle. Because this is a class about using the systems, I'm not going to go into too great of detail of all of that, but we have a lot of other sessions and classes where you can learn more details. First, let's look at some general ERA guidelines. And I just jumped way back. So these are some general guidelines. You may need to follow guidelines for the specific program, such as the request for applications. It might be called the request for proposals, maybe a broad agency announcement or something else, as well as overarching sponsor guidelines, such as the SF 424 for the public health sciences funding, and then the NSF PAPPG, which I mentioned already, for NSF proposals. And so you always want to read those sponsor guidelines because they might be and they often are different from one another. It's very important to make sure you know all of the guidelines that you need to follow. And they are often referenced in that request for proposals if there is one. Sometimes there may not be an RFP. It might be maybe open solicitations or something like that as well. You need to register early. So when you're using an electronic system, you want to make sure that you and all of the others that need access to that system get those accounts set up early. It could take several days or even a week for some of the systems, so make sure that you do that. It might be something that you can go in and do by yourself, or you might need to contact Sponsored Programs. You'll know, you can find it on the system, and we'll also talk about that in a little bit more detail when I go into some of the common systems that we use. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask them or raise your hand. I think I would be able to see that as well, or chat it, okay? So just feel free to, or maybe type it on the screen. just let me know. Then whenever you're working with us on the review and approval, you need to make sure that you've provided us the correct access. We will have automatic access to some systems. Other systems you will need to give us access to at that proposal stage. You also want to make sure that you or the PI, whoever is working with us on that proposal, whoever should be that main contact, is going to be around so that we can contact them if we need to get some questions answered or when we need their concurrence to submit that proposal. There's some general points of contact that you'll always use. And again, I'm going to send these slides to you, so you shouldn't need to write this down. But whenever you are completing these sponsor forms, the program contact is going to be the principal investigator. You're going to put in their email unless the sponsor specifically says it should be someone else. That's the program contact, the PI. The administrative contact is going to be the Sponsored Programs Award Analyst. If you're completing these forms at the proposal stage, you may not know exactly who that will be. So indicate the person that's usually assigned to your team or to your unit or that you work with. But you want to use the awards at UC Davis edu email address. That way it goes to our generic email box, and all of our awards officer and the people who do intake can see it in case it doesn't go to that specific award analyst anymore, or maybe that award analyst has left our team. So just keep that in mind. The financial contact is James Ringo over at Contracts and Grants Accounting. And they want you to use that generic email, the EFA-invoices@ucdavis.edu. And I mentioned availability already. I really think that goes along with that sponsored programs review and approval. Someone needs to be available for us to talk to if we have any questions. There are also some common ERA rules that you'll see. They could be called other things. And again, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on some of the specific systems that we do use. The first set of rules that you have are going to be for the sponsored projects office. That's sponsored programs. We call it sponsored programs on our campus. And so these roles could be called SPO, Sponsored Projects Office. And this is the central office responsible for endorsement or approval or signature on proposals. There also may be a role called the Authorized Organizational Representative, or AOR. And that is a person who can approve proposals or endorse proposals on behalf of the university. And this person could also be called the signing official, the SO. It could be one or the other or both. Then there's some investigator or faculty type roles. The first one is the principal investigator. This is the lead PI or contact PI if this is a grant with multiple PIs, like multiple co-PIs. The co-PI is an investigator with the same responsibility as the PI. So you can see why sometimes you're going to have a contact PD PI. You see that with NIH center grants a lot. And then also investigators might and often do serve as reviewers on behalf of a specific sponsor. Then you have departmental and other staff roles. The other authorized user, or OAU, is a non-investigator role, and it's a person that might assist with preparing the proposal, the budget, maybe doing proposal file updates. So you submit a proposal and then you need to update a file. I think often that's probably NIH or NSF as well, or even post-award actions. And then there's also a financial administrator role, and this is someone who would need access to financial services such as cash requests. Okay, any questions about those general rules before I move on? All right, feel free to speak up if you do have one. Okay, so let's kind of go into proposal submission. On our campus, we use the Cayuse Research Suite. You're always going to use Cayuse SP when you're submitting a proposal to sponsored programs, as well as some award modifications. And we have other classes that go into that, but just understand that those are award modifications that they represent like a significant commitment, change in the commitment of resources. They require dean or department chair approval. So something like a no-cost extension may not need, it's not going to go through Cayuse. You're actually going to send just an email for that. But if you had a change in cost sharing or a change in PI, you would need to submit an internal processing form in Cayuse SP. It's those changes that require approval going through your department, etc. And we have all of those listed out on our website and in our resources, and I have a class about that as well. You also can view other roles. So it's really, really helpful to know that you have the ability to see what roles are set up in other units. If you want to see who can approve a proposal for a co-investigator or a co-PI that you've added to proposal, you could go into the research contact section and see who has the IPF approver role, for example, for that unit. You can also see who has the role manager role for a unit if you need to request access to be able to view their proposals and awards. And then we use Cayuse 424 to submit proposals to most federal sponsors. You're never, ever, ever, ever going to use this to submit to, oh, I just lost somebody. I'm just disabled the waiting room so people can join without being stuck in the waiting room if we get turned on and off. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. You never, ever, ever, ever submit proposals to NSF through Cayuse 424. Always use NSF, FastLane, or Research.gov, and I'll talk about that in my next slide. For NIH, you could use 424 or Assist. It's entirely up to you. I've already said, always use Research.gov or FastLane for NSF submissions. There was going on before where you couldn't use NSF, FastLane, or Research.gov for multi-component submissions, but I believe now you can. They've got it where you can submit multi-project submissions in NSF Research.gov. So that's really, really great. You also, this is also a section in NSF FastLane where you can see, I'm gonna see if I can get my annotate feature and I'll show you where you can see it. So okay, so here's where you prepare and submit proposals, okay? That is where you're going to go in and check the proposal status of a proposal. You would need a pin to do that from the investigator. So the investigator starts the proposal and then we'll give you a pin, usually is how that works. Then to the right of that, you have the proposal review and panel section, that section right there. And in that section is where I mentioned earlier, investigators often serve as reviewers for for sponsors, and this is where they would go in to do that. There's an awards and reporting section where you can do post-award actions, and then the fellowships and honorary awards. These are for graduate student things usually. Down on the bottom, you'll see the manage financials, and then you also have some administration roles, and that's for somebody who can manage users and such. That's a sponsored programs function. NSF FastLane has some roles that you should be aware of. The first one is the sponsored programs roles, and there's only one, pretty much, and that's the AOR role. We are able to approve and submit. And then you have, I've put the investigator and research team roles kind of together, right? So you've got the PI and co-PI, and then you also have that other authorized user, which I defined earlier. That would be a non-investigator person who could work on that proposal for the PI, or even maybe do a revision. You would need the proposal pin and ID number to be able to do that. Some general guidelines for using NSF FastLane or Research.gov are, first, you need to make sure that you and anyone who needs to be added there has a user ID in NSF. You must have an NSF ID, and you can use this link here to look that up. Again, the links will be active in your handout, so that's always important to do. And then you register for that NSF ID if you do not have one. It's very important that you don't have two. So if you have one, register with a different institution, contact us and we'll help you with that. And I have in a moment, I'll tell you how to contact us. So PIs and OAUs need that NSF ID. And then you register for access. Okay, so you get your ID, and then you email that ID to spoerahelp@ucdavis.edu and ask us to give you OAU access. So that's the best way to do it. And if you need any assistance with this, email us at spoerahelp@ucdavis.edu. You also might need to request UCD affiliation for PI. So this is done by, they request access when they register. So they'll create their NSF ID, and during that process, they need to add their UC Davis DUNS number. Then sponsored programs will be notified and go in and approve that affiliation. I think that Ahmad might actually do that process, but just know that's done pretty much automatically, but the PI must request that UC Davis affiliation when they're creating their ID. So you see there's two different ways, there's two different things going on, right? For us admins or you admins, you would request that OAU access by creating your ID and then emailing that ID to us and asking for the access. The PI would register their ID, assuming they already don't have one, request access by a request affiliation to UC Davis by adding in our DUNS number, and then we get notified, right, and it's done that way. So it's two different ways. Be sure to register early. It can take, I think, a few days, if not up to a week. So be sure that you have your NSF ID if you're going to be submitting to NSF. And you don't have to wait till you have a proposal to do it, right? You could go ahead and get your ID set up. But again, it's very important not to have duplicate IDs. So make sure that you always check to see if someone has an NSF ID before creating one, or having them create one, I should say. Then there's some submission guidelines. Those were access guidelines. These are submission guidelines. First, check frequently for updates. So the sponsor often will change their guidelines in between competitive cycles or even during. So make sure that you are aware of any changes they might be making. You can do that by checking their website often to make, during that process that you're preparing the proposal. You can also subscribe to any email listservs they might have about that opportunity, etc. Then you want to give us access. In Research.gov, you'll need to add your assigned SPO analyst. So whenever you're submitting that proposal to us, go ahead and add us in. If you're not sure who that is, you could add the officer that's above your team, and you can, or above the team that supports your department or unit, and you can find that information on our Contact Us page. Or you can add the person you usually work with, and it can always be changed later, right? Just give us access. It's very important and helpful. Then finalize early. We really try to submit proposals to federal sponsors 2 business days before they're due. Federal sponsors request that we do that because then it allows time, it gives that buffer if there are technical difficulties, for one. So oftentimes, if you submit to a sponsor and there's a technical glitch and it's 5 minutes late, sometimes that federal sponsor will be like, too bad, we're not looking at it. But if you submit it a day early or 2 days early and there's a technical glitch, there's no worry there. Also, you can often revise a proposal after it's submitted. So if you submit it 2 days early, but then the PI wants to change like the title or something that we don't have to review, obviously, then that could often be changed after it's submitted. You can do an update for many sponsors if the deadline hasn't reached yet. All right, questions about NSF? All right, so now let's go on to NIH ERA Commons. This is for when you're applying to the National Institutes of Health, or when you are, you might be doing updates for different things, okay? So this is where you log in. You log into the ERA Commons for proposal and award actions, including proposal review. Then you select the appropriate action. So you'll see down on the bottom that we have a few different actions, right? You've got the for applicants, for grantees, and for reviewers. For applicants is where you're going to submit your proposals, and for grantees is where you're going to do post-award actions. For reviewers are where those investigators that are reviewing proposals on behalf of NSF will go in and do their reviews in that for reviewers section. I said I mean NIH, not NSF. Then NIH also has some common rules. You're going to note that these rules are really similar to the Cayuse 424 rules because Cayuse 424 is built off of those NIH definitions. So it kind of makes those two systems really a lot easier for us to kind of understand, I think, the different rules. They transfer over really well. So the first ones I want to talk about are the sponsor programs rules. You have the administrative official who reviews proposals and the signing official who could approve and submit proposals. So that AO wouldn't actually have like signing or endorsement access, right? They can review it, but then someone else, the signing official, is going to approve it. All of our analysts, I think right now, have the signing official status, but I could be wrong. I don't know if we have any new ones. So they all get it, but they don't get it automatically. It takes a little time to get the signature authority. Then you have those investigator research team roles. You've got the PI or project director, so PI-PD role, and this is that lead PI. And then you have the assist role, the ASST, and this is someone who can edit and work on the application. Some general ERA Commons guidelines. Register early. Again, all users are going to need an ERA Commons ID that are going to be added to that application or working in it. Read the sponsor guidelines. Same things I said for NSF, right? Make sure you're checking those links and subscribing to any listservs, maybe looking at any notices that they've sent out. I know NIH does those notices where they make changes and updates to things. I'm having flashbacks to my old job. And then again, finalize 2 days before for the same reasons I explained for NSF, right? We want to be able to submit 2 days early so that we don't encounter any submission issues, or if we do, we have time to mitigate those. Sponsor program submits. We submit the applications and post-award actions, including the progress reports, except for SNAP awards. So if your PI has a SNAP award, they can submit those actions. There's also a system called NIH X-Train, and this is used for training grants. If you work on any training grants, This is the system that you use to manage the trainee appointments. And then you can see the required rules over there to the right. I'm not really going to go into those because that's not really a sponsored programs function that we help with, but we think it's important that everyone is aware. Okay, so now that we've done that, I want to kind of give you a moment, use the annotation feature, and put a stamp in each of the boxes that you believe are guidelines that you should follow when using ERA systems. Yeah, the only one that wouldn't be a guideline is this bottom one that you're not going to respond to us. You should. Okay, so there's that. Now what I want to do, I want to move into Cayuse because that's really, really what we're here to talk about, but it's important to know those other systems. Now we use other systems as well, but those are the most common ones that we use, and I really want you to know those guidelines. Talking about Cayuse, right? You always are going to use Cayuse SP when you're submitting to us. This is how we get that internal routing and approval. You're going to use Cayuse 424 for most federal submissions. And then I talked about research contact rules, but there's also some system administration rules where we can look at units and do some applications like that. What I really want to point out is the Cayuse 424 profile is tied to your Cayuse SP profile, right? They're like one and the same. So I want you to really realize that your Cayuse profile is managed in 424. Now, there are going to be some changes to Cayuse relatively soon, I think. And when they do that, then it's not like your roles are going to be, your profile will be managed in Cayuse, not in Cayuse 424. So I think that'll be a little less confusing. Cayuse SP, so I'm going to talk about this a little bit, right? You've got your proposal and award modification routing. So the lead PI and co-PIs have to certify all of the internal processing forms or proposals. And then the department chair and sometimes the deans of the units involved also have to authorize that before we can even review it and SPO. And then we do the approval in sponsored programs. It holds a record of all of our awards. So it's that database for our proposals, awards, and sub-awards that you have access to as well now. And then we also do advanced account request and routing in here if you need pre-award spending. Cayuse 424 I've mentioned already, right? We've got our professional profiles, and that's what I'm showing you over here on the left. It's housing your appointment, salary, and unit affiliation information. And then on the right, I'm showing how it also is for application submission. These are the main functions that you're going to use in 424. So you'll navigate up in that top bar. So up in the very, very top is the opportunities and then proposals. So opportunities is where, I'll go back real quick, I think. Opportunities is where you find the application, or not the application, but the request for applications, the request for proposals. In order to submit an application to a sponsor in 424, the request for proposals, or whatever they're calling it, has to be in there. You can create a proposal over to the far right, and the only time you select create a proposal from here is when you're preparing a sub-award proposal, or maybe you're using the system to prepare a generic proposal because the sponsor doesn't have like a specific format. You could create a generic proposal and then export it as a PDF and send it over, right? You could do that. But usually we don't do that. Proposals is where you'll go to find proposals that have already been started, that you have access to. And then down on this bottom here, you'll see over here where we have a list of proposals. If you select the read only, if you select the R, it's just you opening it as read only and you can't edit it. If you select the hyperlink, then you actually can edit it. And then over to the far right, you could copy it or delete it. You don't want to delete most things unless it was just something that you really you didn't mean to create. And then the People tab up here, where I have the little box, that's where you'll go to find profiles, to manage profiles, to update your profile, etc. Okay, so now just to kind of put it in perspective, Cayuse is a research suite. It has, they actually have other products, but we only use Cayuse SP and Cayuse 424 at UC Davis. Cayuse SP is where you have your routing and approval, right? That's where you're getting that internal approvals done. However, I've put the professional profiles in here as well because that's also really important and part of that routing and approval process. And all of that goes down to these approving units. So all of these units are the ones that have to approve an internal processing form, not a 424 application, but a Cayuse SP internal processing form. The administering unit, anybody on the investigator research team tab, unless they have specific roles that don't require approval, those are proposal editor and other participant no routing. Any affiliated units that you add to an internal processing form, and then the internal cost sharing unit if you have internal cost sharing. That is one unit code that you enter for all cost sharing, and instructions are on that page as well as on our website. Okay, so now I'm going to try to do this annotate feature again. The first question is, which ERA system or systems should we use to submit a proposal to the National Science Foundation? So which system or systems could we use to submit to the NSF, National Science Foundation? So I'm going to give you the answer. The answer is actually NSF FastLane or Research.gov. Never submit in 424. So, and it's tricky because you will sometimes find opportunities for NSF in 424, right? But don't use them because we've had problems where it actually hasn't reached NSF. And so we've had a lot of issues. So even though you'll see it, yep, you want to use FastLane. All right, perfect. Thank you. So then for the next one is, which ERA system or systems should we use to submit a proposal to NIH? So if you can use more than one, put them both, or, you know, if it's just one, then put your stamp there or type your answers there. Assist or and 424. So those are the two that you can use, and it's up to you. We recommend that you use Assist if you're submitting a multi-component project application to NSF because it's easier to use, and it just looks a little bit better, or a lot better. It creates these summaries and it does some amazing things. But you could use 424. Some people just want to use one system, right? And that's okay. Okay. Which ERA system is used for submission to most federal sponsors? It's 424. We're going to use that to submit to most federal sponsors. Awesome. We're going to keep going. And we might, who knows, maybe we'll end early. We're actually going to get in and get into the system. So it's good to have a little extra time probably. Now let's dive into professional profiles. All users at UC Davis that are going to be working in proposals and such need a 424 profile, because that profile, as I've already said, is also your Cayuse SP profile. If you work in another research administration access and you need to be able to view our repository of records, then you also need a profile so that we can give you the appropriate access in SP. So look at this. The profile is going to hold your appointment information. That's the default home unit, the appointment type, and contact info. The ERA role, so if someone needs to be added as an investigator to a proposal in 424, they need to have this principal investigator role, as well as the assistant role, and then SPO or other permissions, right? And this is in your profile. This is in the 424 profile. It also includes budget information. So it's really awesome when investigators profiles are current, because then when other people add them or when you add them to proposals, then you have their appropriate salary and benefits and appointment type and all of that. Some guidelines for 424. Create and maintain professional profiles. I cannot say that enough, right? You want to create and maintain that professional profile to ensure that it is accurate. If your employee ID is in there, then I don't know how often it does it, but it will actually feed in with the payroll system and pull in the salary information. The PIs for their performance site, that's where they do most of their sponsored work, right? That you'd want to put that there because that's what's going to automatically import to 424 applications, as well as NSP. However, having said that, you can always change it on the individual application. So if it is wrong, someone has a dual appointment, something like that, you can change it, and you should change it to be correct in each application, in SP and 424. On the right side, I want to talk about guidelines for application submission. First, you find the opportunity. You always need to do that first. Well, after you've done the profile stuff and made sure it's accurate, you find the opportunity from the opportunities tab, right? We looked at that earlier. You select that and you find the opportunity you're applying to, and then it will bring in all of the forms that you should need to complete that application to that sponsor, to that specific funding opportunity. Having said that, you want to always read all the guidelines, because there may be forms that aren't there that you have to download, or some that are only required in specific circumstances. So always read the sponsor guidelines. It says give access to others, so you can grant access to other people in your application, and we'll look at that. Complete the forms that you need to include. So I mentioned, like, it's going to import forms, but you might not actually be required to submit all of those forms. Maybe one form is only required if you have human subjects, for example. And so you want to make sure to check all of the forms that you're going to include, because that is how you get them included with the application to the sponsor. We'll look at that, and I think it'll make probably more sense when you see it. I don't know about everyone else, but sometimes I have trouble when I don't see it. Let's correct any errors and warnings that you see. So I'll show you the error and warning bar. That's something that's really neat about 424. It'll help prevent submission rejection issues. Have the full application ready 2 days before the deadline, and in general, sponsored programs is going to submit. The 424 rules. We have our sponsored programs rules. We have the AO and the SO. Same as what I said about NIH. The AO can review proposal and may submit proposals to the sponsor if the AO or SO has approved it, okay? So that AO can't approve the proposal. They can review it and provide, and then get the AO to approve it, and then they can submit it. That's how that would work. And most of our analysts, if not all of them, also have that signing authority ability, so they can approve and submit. Newer analysts will have to approve, have their officer, or will have to review, have their officer approve, and then they will submit. So that's kind of the difference there, and why there are those two rules. Then you have that investigator research team role. You have the PI, and so anyone who needs to be added as an investigator of any type needs to have that PI role, and then the assist role, and that's the people that can assist with proposals. All right, so now what I want to do is actually dive into an activity where you're going to get into the system directly. So the goal here, we're actually going to walk through this together, but what I would like you to do right now is click that link. You should be able to click the link on my screen into Cayuse. That is the main real Cayuse site. We're going to the production or the live site, or you are. I have screenshots. And once you log in with your Kerberos ID and information, go ahead and select Cayuse 424. I'm going to kind of move forward. What we're going to do, though, is each of you are going to look for your profile. And if you have one, you're going to check it and make sure it's accurate, and just give someone else permission to it. You can take them off right away, but I'm going to walk you through doing these steps. If you do not have one, then you're going to create one. And we're in the real site, remember. So real information. Okay. Select the People tab up on the top bar. And then enter your last name in, let me get my mouse where I can show you it again. So enter your last name here, and don't hit search yet, but enter your name, your last name, and down on here in the @ field, make sure you have the Regents of the University of California, Davis -UC Davis. Once you have that, go ahead and select search up here.
Yeah, I don't have one. I don't have a.
Okay, so you're gonna follow through with my next one, okay, Jennifer? I'm gonna show you how to create one. Well, it's up at the top bar where there's that blue plus person. Go ahead and do plus person.
All right, let me get back there.
And then enter your first, middle, and last name. It's really good to do at least a middle initial in case somebody else has your same name. Don't know anyone with your name, but it's possible. There is another Cassie, just not the same last name. And then once you do that, select create new profile. One thing I want to say is only create profiles for yourself, okay? If you have a PI that needs a profile, have them log in and do this step where they create the new profile, and then they're going to do a couple steps, and then they can just tell you about it, okay? So they create a profile, and then they go over here to the plus sign next to the institutional associations, and then you find the Regents of the University of California, Davis, whatever. You find that specific one and select create institutional association. And then they have a profile that's tied into UC Davis, because you see I created this profile, and then over here they have UC Davis. One thing I want to say is if you're editing somebody's profile or your own, never take that off, because that's going to take them away from UC Davis, right? If their department's wrong or something like that, I'm going to show you how to correct it. But you never want to actually delete that that institutional association. They need to have that. So from here, what they could do, you have a PI that didn't have a profile, so they've created a new profile, but they don't want to go in and complete it, right? They want you to do the rest of it. So all they need to do is give you permissions, and they go up to the permissions, the little key at the top right, and then they add in the people that they want. I'm going to walk you through that later, but that's all they need to do. They add you, and then they can log out, and then you can finish it. So easy peasy, right? Not that big of a deal. But you want them to create it, because otherwise it can cause some issues. If it's this person at a different institution that you need to add, then you can create their profile. That's fine. It's not going to cause an issue, because I don't actually know why, but Terry knows why. But it has something to do with, they're not associated with university, so it just doesn't cause login issues and things like that. It's a little bit more technical than I understand, so I'm not going to pretend to. Now, we want to maintain a profile. So we should all be on this page, right? We should all have the UC Davis affiliation. From here, select contact info. And this should be your address. This should be your office address and phone number and email. If it's not current, then correct it. Let me know if I'm going too fast. Then you want to select ERA role. And you want to make sure that you have that assistant role. That's going to allow you to work on proposals for people. If you as a PI, you would, or anyone who's going to be added as like an investigator to any type of application in 424, then you want to make sure they have that principal investigator role, even if they wouldn't be the lead PI, but they're going to be like senior personnel and named on that proposal or a proposal. Now go ahead and select, I already showed you that. So the department, division, and title. This is where, okay, so this is an important part, this department, division, title. You want to make sure that's correct for your principal investigator. For us, not such a big deal, right? Because we're not going to involve, our roles don't affect the routing in SP. But this is where, if you're seeing like a lot of issues with people's departments that are defaulting in SP, this is where it's corrected. And I apologize, the list is not really fun, but you have to dig through this list right here and find the correct code. And make sure it's the unit code that's used for grants. Neither one of your School of Medicine, so it should not be too big of an issue. The next thing is the salary and appointment type, the salary and fringe worksheet. This is really a great area for the investigators, right? You have, if you put their employee ID, then it'll tie it to their personnel information at some point. Then you can put in their appointment types, their, like how many months and the salary, right? So if we annualize salary, if you do it like this, it allows you to already have that annualized salary kind of calculating in, not a budget class, but we have budget classes. So that's the academic month salary, and then the summer month salary. That's this person's annualized salary. And I imported the institutional rates, and there's their fringe benefit code, right? So the next is the performance site, and this should be the place where the investigator does most of their work. So it's automatically populated to their 424 applications. It can be changed again. We're going to go into an application and you'll be able to see how we can change that. But right now, I'm hoping you're just going through and making sure your information is correct. There's no harm in having it right. Maybe you'll be added to a grant one day. The next thing to do is permissions, and I just jumped ahead. So you'll select the permissions tab, and again, that's that key on the far right side up here, and add somebody to your profile. You can delete them. You could just go ahead and pretend like you're going to add them, right? So select add user, and then put somebody's last name in there and select search. And searching can take a moment. Once you get the next pop-up to the right of my screen, select the name of the person you want to add, and then select what permissions they should have. If you want to delete them, just select the X. And so this is what you want your investigators to do, right? A lot of times they don't want to work on their profile. Have them create it, associate it with UC Davis, and give you permission. Then it will tie that profile automatically to their Kerberos ID, and so it will be automatically tied to their login. If you're having an issue or you created one for somebody or they have duplicate IDs, please email us at orcayusehelp@ucdavis.edu. That'll be in your resources section as well. Application materials. So again, we're only going to use it, you're only going to use 424 when the sponsor allows it, right? And never for NSF. I'll say that so many times because it's really, really important. We use it for the sponsor application. So you need all of the sponsor forms in there. That is what is being submitted to the sponsor. Anything that needs to be submitted to the sponsor has to be in there. You might also have different documents or extra documents in Cayuse SP. When you submit in Cayuse SP, we need the proposal to arrive at least 5 business days before the sponsor deadline. And that's really, really important because that allows us to be able to do a full review if we get at least 5 business days. And that doesn't mean you submit for routing 5 business days before the deadline in SP, because it still has to route through all of those offices to get the authorizations and the PI certifications, right? So it's really important that you build all this time in. You want to make sure that you follow the rules and provide all of the required information and documents. And how do you know you're doing that? You read, right? You read everything. Like, I think that if you take nothing except for one thing away from any of my classes, is please read all of the guidelines. Like, it's so important, and it changes, and it may not be fun reading, but it's so important, right? That's how painful and just devastating would we feel if we worked on a proposal, we submit it, and then it gets rejected without review because we didn't put it in the right margins, right? So just read everything. I can't even stress how important that is. Use the resources. We've got handbooks and user guides. Read the pages. And here I'm saying the internal processing form pages because that has some extra information for you. Confirm your approvers in SP. So make sure that your units that it's routing to have approvers established. And monitor the routing. Make sure it's getting to us 5 business days before that deadline. Now, people kind of freak out when I say we need it 5 business days before. It doesn't mean that it's like the full application. We call it the full application package, but we really do not mean everything. We mean the completely routed and authorized IPF, the NSP, the budget spreadsheet, if it's required by the sponsor, If it's not required by the sponsor, we still really, really encourage you to do a budget spreadsheet because it's really helpful in a lot of ways. But if the sponsor does not require a budget and you will not be providing a budget, indicate that in your submission notes in SP, in Cayuse SP, to make sure it doesn't get turned back to you for a request for more documentation. The same with the budget justification, same rules apply. And the scope of work, that can be a draft. It just needs to be accurate and complete enough for us to do our review. We're not reviewing the science or the integrity of what is being proposed. We're reviewing just on the things that we review on, which is really administrative type stuff. We don't check margins and things like that, but we look to make sure the required documents are there based on the information that we have. And we look at the scope of work to make sure that the appropriate indirect cost rate and base are being used. That's really a big thing. Or the French benefit codes, right? We're looking at all of that in that scope of work. In Cayuse 424, you also have some routing, approval, and submission. PI concurrence is required. Now, if they don't want to do it online for some reason, in 424, they can email us and email your analyst and tell them that they concur. That's fine. And then SPO approval is required. So we always have to approve it in order to submit it. Usually we submit it, but some PIs have requested access to submit after our approval. And that is possible, but we don't encourage it, but it's definitely possible. There are some other, you can add other people in 424 to the routing chain, but I wouldn't unless I had to, right? Hopefully all of your approvals are being captured in SP. You don't really want that separate approvals going on in 424, but I think some departments might use it for their own internal kind of review and like, oh yeah, this person checked off. Like you could do that, but just remember that we can't approve it in sponsor programs until everyone has concurred, right? So just remember that, or everyone has approved it. All right, so gonna kind of give you a little bit of a demo on how we submit an application, and then I'm gonna give you a scenario and ask you to do it, all right? And we're not gonna use the live site anymore, so go ahead if you have a minute and log out of Cayuse and in both of the windows, and then close that, because in a moment you'll open a new browser session and log into our demo site to do an application. What you will do is, based on the scenario I've given you, you'll go to opportunities, and you'll find the opportunity. Once you find the opportunity, this is just an example. This is if you select the little information icon, which is over here next to the opportunity, then it will give you the information about that opportunity. If it was a real application, you would be going to the sponsor's website and reading all of those relevant guidelines. Then you want to select the plus sign next to the opportunity that you're going to apply to. So that's what you'll do. And you'll want to make sure to read the title and the component ID to make sure you create the correct proposal, or you select the correct opportunity to create that proposal. And then you're going to complete a pop-up form with some information, right? You're going to put in the proposal name, the PI. We're all going to log in as Amy admin, so you shouldn't need to search for PIs. You should be able to find Charlie on your list. And then you're going to put in if you need to, the default IDC rate, the number of budget periods, the due date, and the validation type should auto-populate as NIH. So if this is a real proposal, you would be checking, well, I'm telling you right now, check the list before searching. If the PI is not listed, then you'll search, but make sure to change the organization down here to the Regents at University of California, Davis, or else your search will take forever. In today's exercise, you should not need to do that. You should just be able to select the name. And here, I just kind of wanted to show you what a form looks like. So this is what the form has populated based on my selection. You'll see over to the left that you have a lot of forms, and some are checked and some are not checked. You want to make sure to check them if you want that included in your application. For example, in this case, we need to submit a budget, but it doesn't show us, we have two options, the PH398 modular budget and the R&R subboard budget attachment, right? So NIH has a rule, I think it might be 250 or 200,000. Most proposals under a certain amount, you only must provide the modular budget. and that's an abbreviated budget. So if you were going to provide the modular budget, you would select modular budget. However, we always encourage you to complete the R&R budget. It will auto-populate the modular budget for you, but you have that detailed R&R budget as well. But you would only check the modular budget if that is what you were going to provide. Same down here, like you see this PH assignment request. Again, maybe your PI wants to request assignment to a specific division within, or a specific institute within NIH, right? And I was showing you the wrong budget earlier. So this is the subaward budget attachment. That's if you have budget subawards. The 398 modular budget is here, and the R&R budget is up here. And this is the one we recommend people complete, even if you're going to provide this one. You would just check that box instead of this box if you're doing the modular budget. And then another thing that sometimes people get confused about is down here in this person to be contacted. It should be your SPO analyst. In our exercise, you'll just find my name and put me in there. And now we're at our exercise. So what I would like you to do now is go ahead and log into our test instance. Let me know when you're into Cayuse 424, right? So select log in as Amy admin, and the password is training, all lowercase, and then select 424. Okay, awesome. And I just did too. So I'm gonna minimize mine. Okay, so go ahead and select 424. And then here's your scenario. I've got the program announcement for you and the deadline and the budget. So just complete the information that you can. The budget, I would like you to complete the R&R budget with the information that you have. And what I want to point out, this is a 2-year project. So before you get started, I want to show you one thing, just to make it a little bit easier for you, okay? So you should see my Cayuse 424 screen, I hope, or Cayuse. I'm going to select 424. And I want to show you how when you're doing the budget, you can just save a little time so that you don't have to enter everything. Okay, so let me just open one. I have, where's my test one for today? It's down 202532. And you'll notice that what we like to do, you don't have an SP application that's associated or proposal that's associated with what we're doing today. But one of the things we like to do is in our proposal title is put the actual SP number, and it helps us tie the two together since we're not pairing. But go ahead and select that, find that opportunity if you can. But what I want to show you is in the budget real quick. So on this budget screen, you've got this little staircase. You can enter the information for year 1 and then go to the staircase and select all the, it's probably not showing this now. Hold on, let me share. And then select all of the categories that you want to copy over and put budget period 1 to budget period 2 and do replicate selected categories. So that way you don't have to enter both budget periods. And then if you need to escalate them, you can go back to the staircase after you've replicated them, select what you want to escalate, make sure the rate you want to escalate by is included, make sure it says to the end of the budget or the project, and do replicate or escalate selected categories. So just complete it to the best of your ability.
Now let's take a few moments to look at how this proposal should have been entered. I'm going to start with SF424 R&R page 1. You'll note up here that I have my title of the project, and I've indicated the Cayuse SP proposal number because in my example, I actually didn't provide this information to you, but I've already began my associated IPF in Cayuse SP. I'm going to start here at the top of the page. You're going to note that this is information for the sponsor to complete. My type of submission is an application. My information regarding my applicant institution has already imported based on what I entered or who I selected as my principal investigator. Here is my sponsored programs analyst, as Cassie's the person to be contacted if there are any questions. You'll see a lot of this information has auto-imported as far as the employer identification number and the type of institution that we are. The type of application is new because I haven't submitted this before, or I should say the PI has not submitted this before. It's not going to be submitted anywhere else. And again, I have my descriptive project title. So this is the actual title of the project, my proposed project dates, my PI's information. And then if I go to page 2, you will see that this information auto-imports based on our budget, which we will look at in a moment. And then we have no estimated program income. This is not covered by Executive Order 12372. You would find this in your sponsor guidelines. This is where your PI certifies and agrees that the information provided within here is correct. Again, I have my sponsored programs analyst. This is the person who will be signing off or approving the proposal on behalf of the UC Regents. Our performance site auto-imported based on our PI, but we could change that if necessary. Our other project information is where you would indicate the information regarding the human subjects, the vertebrate animals, and then if you know this other information, you can complete it or you could request it from the principal investigator. Here is where you would upload your project summary or your abstract and your other information that's required. You'll note that I could also delete this document that was already uploaded. And now I have an additional error. I used to have 11 errors, now I have 12. If I select this bar, I can see that I'm missing, my DUNS number is incorrect, my project summary is required, my project narrative is required, etc. And if I select a hyperlink, it will actually take me to the field that needs to be corrected. The DUNS number is just incorrect because this is in the test environment. So in the real environment, you should not experience that. To upload a document, which I did not give you, but I want to demonstrate, select Add. And then make sure you're uploading it in the final section, or it would not actually be included with your final application to the sponsor. So you want to make sure to always upload PDFs in this final area. If you need to upload a document that is not a PDF, perhaps maybe the sponsor requires a budget in Excel, please contact us at orcayusehelp@ucdavis.edu or ask your proposal analyst in sponsored programs to upload the document for you. In the R&R Key Person section, I have my PI with their project role. You can see here that I've gone ahead and uploaded Charlie's bio and current and pending. And then I also have Cassie listed as a co-investigator. I could upload her bio sketch and current and pending if I had it. I have my R&R budget form checked because that's the form that I'm going to be completing and providing to my sponsor. I'm not going to go through all of these pages with you because I did give you a demonstration on how to enter such information. So instead, I'm just going to go to page 4, where you can see down at the bottom that my numbers, my amounts match the budget that I provided you in the proposal in the scenario. And that is what you should be checking if you've completed this on your own. We do have human subjects, so we would need to upload information regarding the study. We're not doing the modular budget, but you can see it's auto-completed based on the information we entered in our R&R budget. If we had a subaward, we would enter them here. Here's our cover page information. We're not euthanizing any vertebrate animals, so I've selected no. We don't have any program income, and we're not using human embryonic stem cells. This is not a renewal, so we can skip this. This is actually not a question that we need to complete. This is where you would indicate if you're changing a PI or institution. Here's where the research plan should be uploaded. And this is the area where your PI can make a PH assignment request. Now that we have entered our Cayuse 424 application, let's take a moment to look at the routing and approval process. The PI will automatically be listed there because they should be concurring their proposal in Cayuse 424. There are occasions where this needs to be done via email, and that is okay. However, we do prefer for this to be done in Cayuse 424 when the application to the sponsor is here in the system. You should also add your sponsor programs analyst after Charlie, or the PI, Charlie in this case. The little lightning bolt you see there means that this person is an AOR and can approve this proposal. Next, if you go down to the electronic submission tab, or the electronic submission area, you can see the proposal submission history. You can also select the opportunity details tab to look at the actual, or to get the link to the actual opportunity. Now let's take a moment before the end of class to think about the learning objectives. I want to make sure that you understand some of the general ERA guidelines. Also, that you understand the purpose of professional profiles and why it's important that we all have them. That you know how to create and update those profiles, and that you know how to submit a proposal in Cayuse 424 and work with sponsored programs during that review and sponsor submission process. If you have any questions about that, now's a good time to go back through your materials that if you're viewing this online, you will have access to, or that I will email you after class. You can let us know how you feel about this class if it was helpful using our evaluation link there, and this is our sponsored programs information as well as mine. You also have many resources available to you. There's a lot of acronyms we use, so we have a list of those. There are many sponsor resources that you'll find helpful during the application process. These are resources for Cayuse SP and Cayuse 424 from our office. There's a lot of other resources that we offer, and so do other offices that you may want to look at. And these are our general contacts. If you have questions regarding a proposal before it's assigned, please email us at proposals@ucdavis.edu. If you need help with Cayuse, please email orcayusehelp@ucdavis.edu. There are many Office of Research listservs you may want to subscribe to. The first one is where we send information out about upcoming research forums and changes in sponsor policy, etc. We have research administration forums the fourth Wednesday of each month from 8:30 to 10 a.m. January through October. There are no meetings in November and December. And that's the end of today's class. So thank you. I appreciate all of your time, and I hope you found it useful.